Good morning. Okay, there we go. Sweet. Welcome to the journey. I really do appreciate, even if you're grumpy today, everybody coming and taking the time out this weekend just to come and be here, be together, to check us out. If you're here with us for the first time, again, thanks for coming, and want you to know, honestly and from the bottom of our hearts, that wherever you're at on your journey, no matter what you believe or where you've been or where you're going, we welcome you here and want you to know that you are always welcome here. And so we hope you enjoy it today and that you do be back with us as well. Well, U-turn, you're staying in today, I believe. And so a little change of plans last minute. But I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. I love the holiday. And I am so thankful for the pilgrims who set things into motion, to get the holiday going that we've been celebrating for almost 400 years now, since, 1621, I think, is when they first had their first Thanksgiving recorded. So a few more years, and we will hit 400 on that. But, it's the one day a year when diets are irrelevant, and that's a good thing. It's kind of like culturally accepted gluttony on that one day. So, it's kind of fun. But I love the time off the family, the focus on being grateful, having old friends and new friends come over. The endless hours of football is great. And, of course, the food. The mashed potatoes and gravy, the stuffing, the yams, the green bean casserole, which Wendy makes an amazing green bean casserole, the cider, the pie, and the big dead bird. That is just wonderful. It's a really satisfying time in so many ways. It is. Spiritually, you give thanks to God. Relationally, you're with family. Physically, you get some rest, and you're not hungry. And that's a good thing. For me, it's a beautiful thing. But then again, for me, so is hunger, because then I get to eat. And that's a beautiful thing as well. So I enjoy that. In fact, here's a little video clip of someone who else enjoys food. So let's do the Alaska one there. Someone had a good Thanksgiving there. So, anyway, don't go ice fishing in Alaska, okay? But anyway, so this morning we get to continue our series called God Talk. And we've been looking at a number of different ways that God speaks to people and speaks to people like us, speaks to us, so that we can learn to recognize his voice in our own personal lives. God speaks. He speaks to every one of us here, no matter where you're at on your journey. Okay, whether you're a Christ follower or not, God pursues us and God speaks to us and He wants us to hear Him. But it's up to us to learn the language that God speaks. Just like our kids have to learn our language when they grow up, right? My kids, as they were growing up, they didn't learn Spanish or French. They learned English, right? Because it's the language of the parent. And so we do the same thing so that we can hear and follow God. And I hope this series so far has been helpful for you. Whether you're a Christ follower or not, I can't encourage you enough to begin putting into practice the things that we've been talking about over the last few weeks as far as hearing God. And especially spending the time reading the Bible and getting to know what God's voice sounds like as you read. And we still have a few life journals available out there on your way out if you'd like. And it's got a Bible reading plan there that you can go along. Because sometimes, we're like, I don't know where to read, I don't know where to start, and so forth. And everything's there for you if you want to do that. And you write down things that God speaks to you. And so it's a really powerful tool. And we have a few left there, and I encourage you to pick one up on your way out. But this morning, we're going to talk about hunger. We're still in the same series, but rather than explore another aspect of how God speaks to us, we're going to look at something that's just as important in the process of hearing God, and a key ingredient to hearing God. And so the title of the message this morning, the title of the talk, is called Spiritual Hunger. Okay? One of the reasons that people often don't hear God's voice is because we often have little or no hunger for Him. Little or no hunger to hear what He has to say. A lot of times we're just not interested. And so as we begin, let's take a look at some of the words found in Psalm 63, words that illustrate a person who desires to know God and desires to hear from him. So it'll be on the screen as we go along. I think it'll be on the screen. It says this: "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you, in a dry and weary land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me." And in one other translation, that part where it says, "My soul clings to you," it's translated another way: "My soul follows hard after you, God." You know, what a picture of someone who has spiritual hunger, someone who's hungry specifically for God. And so let's look at, I invite you to take notes if you'd like. There's a green sheet in your handout. You can follow along, and it helps you to stay awake sometimes, when you're doing something else. So go ahead and fill in the blanks as we go along. So first point is hunger is powerful. It's powerful. Would you agree with that? Who would agree that hunger is powerful? It really is. Yeah, I have another clip that I want to show you. It's a little bit more funny. It's a funny take on the power of hunger. And the comedian, his name is Sinbad. He hasn't been around in a while, and so I kind of dug this up, but it's kind of funny. So it's from a thing he did, a stand-up he did called Afros and Bell Bottoms. So let's go ahead and roll that clip if it's ready.
And man, I remember in 1989, I first started gaining weight. And nobody wants to work out, so we look for that miracle, right? I went down to Nutrisystem. No. It ain't natural to eat that little amount of food. It don't make no sense. Know why you lose weight on them programs? Because you broke. You don't spend all your money on the program. You don't spend $500. People go, "Man, you look good. I want to eat. I ain't got no money. I want a sandwich." You hanging outside McDonald's at the window. Don't throw them fries away. I'm on Nutrisystem. Come here. Man, I went down to Nutrisystem. The woman brought me my meal for the week. She brought me this little bag. I said, "This the snack, right? But you gonna put some groceries in some boxes, right? Just to hold me till you get back, right? Because I'm gonna eat this up in the car. This ain't no meat. This is a snack to get home. That's what this is." And they try to set you up. That's the beauty of the program. It looks like it's not gonna fit you up, but it will. Oh yeah? Watch. Ate everything up. I'm still hungry. And then she had an answer for that. See, if you get hungry, eat a Nutri-Chip. A chip. Open up the bag, take out a chip, and close the bag back up. If I could do that, I wouldn't be on Nutri-System. That's why I'm down here. I can close the bag up. Once I open the bag, it's time to eat. No, it ain't gonna work. I'm sorry. Again, I'm addicted to chocolate. Boy, I'm a chocoholic. They got this chocolate spray. You supposed to spray this. Look, she had a flashback. Look at her. She like, you been on Nutri-System. Look at her. She like, was you on the program? Don't even try it. You was having a flashback. I said that little bag, you hit your hand. They brought me to a little chocolate spray. Talking about, if you get hot, you want some candy, spray the chocolate. People thought I was on crack. I was. Jacking for spray. That was my life. I had to go to bed before and get straightened up. Messing me up, Jack.
Yeah. So he's really funny in this whole. You can go on YouTube and you can find the whole thing there. He talks a little bit next about cleansing his colon. And anyway, I decided to spare you that one. But it's actually not too bad. It's actually pretty funny. But, hunger is powerful. I mean, it really is. It moves us. It motivates us. It makes us do crazy things sometimes, right? The day after Thanksgiving is called Black Friday. And a bunch of normal people who, go a little bit crazy because they're a little bit hungry for a deal, right? And if you've been out on Black Friday, it's crazy. Normal people go crazy because they're hungry for a deal. And so, so everybody goes out on Black Friday, and while the stores go black financially, everyone else goes red financially. They should call it Red Friday. I don't know. But anyway, so this next point is hunger drives our lives. It drives our lives, and it's so true. It doesn't matter what we're hungry for. If we're hungry enough, that hunger will turn into a driving and almost controlling force in our lives. And I don't know what some people are going to do now that Hostess has just shut its doors for good. I mean, I can't imagine. Some people are kind of like, I don't know what life's going to be like without Twinkies, right? And so, they're going to start writing some stories, Life Without Twinkies, the true story and how people, overcame. But anyway, hunger is powerful, and it drives our lives. Proverbs 16:26 says this: the laborer's appetite works for him. His hunger drives him on. Okay? In other words, the guy doesn't want to starve, so he works. Hunger is the motivator there because he doesn't want to starve. He wants to eat, and eating is good. Have you ever been to SeaWorld or some place like that where they have dolphins or killer whales that are jumping through hoops and doing backflips and, and squealing and making all this fun stuff, like a bird? Anyone ever seen that before? Okay, some of us have. What have you ever noticed what the trainers are doing through the entire show? They're giving little sardines, Here's a little cookie. I mean, come on, right? Because hunger drives them. It drives even animals to do things they weren't ever meant to do, okay? Wildlife naturally fears man. But you can train a deer or a squirrel to eat right out of your hand because they're hungry. They will overcome that fear because they're hungry. Even Scooby-Doo got rewarded with Scooby snacks, right? So, not too long ago, I was taking some pictures. I was looking at some pictures, actually, that I took from my 2-month trip to Africa back 20 years ago. Man, I was skinny. Holy cow. Since that trip, I've gained about 45 pounds since that trip. I didn't grow any taller. I was the same height. And I'm not I gained 45 pounds because I love food. And I'm not a picky eater, which makes it easier to gain, weight. But ice cream is one of my weaknesses. I love good quality mint chocolate chip ice cream, like Breyers, good stuff. One of my favorites that we can't get here is called Coffee Bean Blast. They sell it at Trader Joe's, and you can actually see the coffee grounds in that coffee ice cream. It's absolutely amazing. But I'll tell you, there were times when there was nothing. Back as they had Trader Joe's in Central Oregon, and there were times when there was nothing that would stop me from driving 30 minutes to Bend, getting a quart of that stuff, and driving 30 minutes back, eating half of it on the way back. But it's just amazing stuff. As you know, I love football. And in fact, did you guys happen to see Monday Night Football where the 49ers just roach stomped the Bears? That was pretty awesome. Anyway, but playoffs are coming up, and the best teams get in the playoffs. Well, something that you'll hear in the NFL players and coaches and commentators and so forth is that winning often doesn't come down to which team is more talented or better coached, but whoever is hungrier for the win. Who's hungrier for the win? Whoever's hungriest for the win is going to get the win. And so, which team is more willing to pay the price and endure the pain and bleed for it? Self-made millionaires are millionaires because they hungered for it, and nothing was going to get them get in their way. Hunger drives crazy, people do crazy things and insane things sometimes. Like this next picture, actually, this is the backside of the Mavericks, okay? The Mavericks are these 50, 60-foot waves down in Half Moon Bay, California. And that actually, the first slide before that was a picture of the front side of those Mavericks, okay? And I've been on the backside. That's not the boat I was in, but I was in a boat about that size because I went deep sea fishing. We had to go around them, and it was phenomenal from the backside seeing how big those things were. You know, hunger to catch a wave, hunger for the thrill drives people to do something, you know, I would never do. I don't like going to the ocean because of sharks, much less being crushed by a million pounds of water. But, you know, hunger will drive us to do anything to satisfy that hunger. It drives us. It directs our steps. It fuels our desires. And so this next point is we have to identify what we are hungry for and then redirect that hunger. You know, and we can easily identify what we hunger for by looking at the things that we pursue. What is it we pursue? Because we will pursue the things that we are hungry for. If it's God, we will pursue God. If it's an In-N-Out burger, we'll drive 6 hours to Salt Lake City to pick up an In-N-Out burger and drive 6 hours back. I haven't done it yet, but I know people who have, and I'm jealous. Anyway, but you know, if it's something else, we'll pursue that. Some people hunger for security more than anything. And they'll pursue whatever it is that makes them feel secure, whether it's money or a relationship or a marriage or a job that they may not even need, okay? Some people hunger for control. They don't trust God or anyone else in this life or in their life. And so they'll do anything that they feel will give them control in their life. And sometimes they'll try to control other people because controlling their own life, well, it just got a little bit boring. I got to control somebody else, you know, whatever it is. And so they hunger for that. And some of us know people like that. Wealth and possessions. Some people will go into debt for the bigger house and the bigger car. Back when I lived in Pleasanton, California, there was this neighborhood called Ruby Hills. And you know where that's at, right? Yeah. And big, huge, hunking 10,000 square foot houses that in the Bay Area, okay, that people would sink a ton of money, and you'll see Corvettes, and you'll see all kinds of cars in front, and it was a regular thing that they'd get their power shut off because they were so far into debt they couldn't pay their electric bill, you know, and we knew people who that was their story. But it's, you know, it's something that Jesus says is you can't serve God and money, okay, at the same time. Some people hunger for praise or accolades, right? They'll do anything to get stroked. Some people will even, you know, serve God or serve in a church so that they can hear people comment about what an amazing person they are, always giving and always serving. You're such a wonderful person. I can't believe you do so much for God, you know. And in reality, they may be doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, the wrong motive. It's not to serve God or people, but to serve a hunger for validation. Right? And so we have different kinds of hungers. People hunger for love, affection, significance, escape, happiness, right? To be entertained. Many people hunger for the destructive habits or lifestyles that we get into, sin. And there are probably millions of other things that people hunger for and go after, and we try to fill that God-shaped hole that's in our heart with everything that we think will fit but God. And when we begin to hunger and thirst after these things, and we begin to feed that hunger, then our hunger for God naturally decreases because we're filling it up with something else, even though it doesn't quite satisfy. You know, if I have desire to control things, my hunger to hear God's voice will diminish because I want my will above all, because I'm a control freak, right? I don't want to hear what God has to say, so I'm not going to be interested. Are you following? I'm going to pursue that. But whatever our hunger, we need to be willing to identify it and then redirect it. Last night, I had a big hunger for mint chocolate chip ice cream. And so, you know, it was like one of those, I don't know what I'm going to do without it. And so I left the house, went, you know, I live in Cuna, went down to Paul's, walked in there, looked at their ice cream, stunned at the $7.29 price tag on a half gallon of ice cream, and figured that I wasn't that hungry for mint chocolate chip ice cream. I redirected my hunger and went over to Walgreens and got a little $2 thing of chocolate chunk. Anyway, but hunger, our lack of hunger for God is often reflected in the amount of time or the amount of time we don't spend in the Bible or prayer or trying to listen to God. God wants us to hunger after him, to hunger for his wonderful voice, to have a heart after his, like that psalm that we just read. My heart, my soul follows hard after you. It clings to you, oh God. Here's a couple of other passages. Jesus said this, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of loving. Okay, it's a lot of hungering that he says, do that. And it's not just because, it's a commandment, but it's for our good. Okay, next one. He said this, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. Man, fill that God-shaped void in your soul with him first, and God will fill everything else up around. You don't have to worry about that. For those here who are Christ followers, another passage says this, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts or hunger for things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. And so God invites us to hunger for him, for his voice. He promises to satisfy that hunger as well, to fill that God-shaped hole if we direct our hunger and we place it onto him. But there are two enemies of hungering for God that in his voice I want to look at quickly. The first enemy is self-sufficiency, okay? And a self-sufficient attitude, okay? If there's anything that keeps us from hungering for God or from hearing his voice, it is that self-sufficient attitude. The belief that we're doing okay by ourselves, okay? That we don't need him. We're convinced that we're full and we don't need anything else. If I've gorged myself on 1.5 quart of mint chocolate chip ice cream, I'm not going to want the salad and the bowl of spaghetti that's come after that, right? Because I'm full and I think I'm pretty good as it is, right? I don't need that other meal. Over the years, this is probably one of the biggest obstacles to reaching people for Christ in our country today. Because self-sufficiency says, I have money, I have investments, I have things. Shoot, I can have all the Twinkies I want, because Hostess will always be there for me. Not, right? Why do I need God? And it's so easy to have that attitude. So easy. I mean, living in the United States, we could have just about anything that we want instantly if we're willing to pay for it. Almost anything, especially compared to the rest of the world. We can have anything. If I'm hungry for a movie, there's Redbox. If I'm hungry for a sappy chick flick, which I've never experienced that before, I can get 10 of them at Redbox. If I'm hungry for an action-packed, blow people's heads off thriller, I can get 10 of those. I can get 10, I can load up like an addict at Redbox. Of course, I'm always, I almost always find myself standing behind somebody who has no idea what they're hungry for because they're standing there going through the movie menu 3, 4, 5, 6 times before they figure out what they want. But anyway, and then I'm hungry to get out of there. But a big part of the reason for our self-sufficient attitude is that even in this slumped economy, we can have just about anything we want still because we just pull out our Visa. Oh, worried about it later. There we go. I'm distracted again. There we go. There we go. Black Friday. It's one of those times, right? And often it's not until we experience some kind of a loss that people experience, that they realize that they just might need God. A loss of a relationship, loss of a job, maybe loss of a family member. Some people are facing the loss of their own life. And finally, it's like, maybe I do need God. We become almost like this guy that Jesus talks about in the New Testament book of Luke, chapter 12. We'll read it. It says this. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or arbiter between you?" Now, if I had been alive in Jesus' day, I sure hope that I wouldn't have asked Jesus for an idiot favor like that, okay, and so, because Jesus kind of slams him on the spot. But then he said to him, watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what should I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. I've got storage units, Hey, I'll build more storage units. And there I'll store all my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Ouch. Kind of puts things in perspective, Our self-sufficiency is such an obstacle to hungering for God. Listen to this passage that we're going to read next. It's from the time when God had set Israel free from Egypt. And so Moses gives them this warning. They've just been set free from 400 years of slavery. Okay? And so listen to these words. Be on the screen as well. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert for these 40 years, to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word, there's his voice, that comes from the mouth of God. And he went on, he said, be careful that you don't forget the Lord your God. Otherwise, when you eat, and when he talks about going into the promised land, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt from the land of slavery. Does that not speak to us today? I don't know about you, but it speaks to me. And I think it speaks to our country in a big way. Obviously, we weren't set free from slavery. There was slavery, but you get the idea, okay? This is God's heart for us. And what a picture of forgetting and no longer hungering for him or for his words or his voice, because we're distracted with everything else that we've gained for ourselves. We get complacent because we think we're sufficient. And it's a big enemy of hunger. Hungering for God. I'm reading this book right now. It's amazing. It's these true stories. I'll share more about it in a couple of weeks, but true stories about the spiritual vacuum that is an incredible spiritual hunger that exists over in the Middle Eastern Muslim countries. Okay? Spiritual vacuum, spiritual hunger that is so large. Okay? But for countless Muslims living there, many have been realizing that Islam falls so short of meeting their spiritual needs, but they don't know what else there is, and they're too afraid to explore. And so this book, again, I'll share it with you in a couple of weeks, describes story after story of Muslims who, in their spiritual hunger, okay, and these are in places where Christianity is illegal, they're having dreams and visions of Jesus appearing to them out of nowhere and calling them to follow him. And they're turning from Islam and following Christ secretly. It's a powerful book. It's like, whoa, man, talk about spiritual hunger. See, he meets us where there's a hunger. But if we're self-sufficient and we think we're full, we're not going to be hungry. I can't wait to share some of those stories with you. But anyway, next point. Fear is an enemy of spiritual hunger. We're so often of trying something new, okay? As many of you know, I'll eat almost anything. I'm not afraid to try something new. Stick it in my mouth, it's good. Most things anyway. But a lot of people have food phobias. Have you ever noticed that? Some people here, I think, have food phobias, okay? There's no stinking way that they'll try sushi. And sushi's good. It really is, okay? Some people, if they venture into a Chinese restaurant, they stick with the basics, man. Sweet and sour pork or chicken and none of that weird stuff, right? No squid, Thai food, not going to walk into that. Vietnamese, no way. They'll serve it snakes and spiders. I don't know. But, people get really afraid of different kinds of food. In kind of the same way, we fear or fear will keep us from hungering after God, because that's new for a lot of people. And whether a person is spiritually curious or a Christ follower, a lot of people, if they're honest, fear hearing God's voice because what might he say to me? What might he tell me to do? Okay? And, we read in the Bible stories like the rich young ruler who wanted to follow Christ. And we hear Jesus telling him, if you want to follow me, sell all your possessions and give to the poor, then come follow me. And we're like, whoa, what's that about, right? And so we fear that God's going to call us to do the same. What if I hear God call me to sell everything that I have and give to the poor? What if God calls me to go to China or Africa or San Francisco? Oh my gosh, what if he tells me he wants me to cheer for the 49ers, right? And I would say, don't worry, because cheering for the 49ers is part of becoming more like Jesus. So anyway. I have a friend who, she went on a 2-month missions trip to Papua New Guinea, somewhere in the South Pacific. And she was there serving one of the indigenous tribes there. And they came to her and they offered her, they were sitting down to have dinner, and they brought one of their delicacies, which was live grub worms. And the live grub worms were the kind that you had to bite them before they bit you. And I'm like, that's my limit, okay? She crossed that threshold, and she did it. I'm like, are you serious? She goes, yeah, actually it wasn't too bad. You got used to it for a while. Anyway, but we're like, what if God asked me to do that, right? But God does test our hearts and our love for him, like he did with the young ruler, like he did with Abraham and so many people in the Bible. Okay, but he will always give us the grace and everything that we need to follow through with what he calls us to do. He really will. He will stretch us and show us that we can step out of our comfort zone and do something that we've never thought we were able to do. But if we're not willing to hear his voice, we'll stay in our small little box. Small, safe little box we think is safe. So, next point. Feed the right hunger. The more I feed my hunger for ice cream, the more I hunger for it. And the opposite is true. The less I feed my hunger for ice cream, the less frequently I hunger for it. I hunger for the things that I regularly feed on. Wish I could feed on that today. My brother living in the Philippines has developed an acquired taste and a resulting hunger for something called durian. It's a Filipino fruit that you can smell from hundreds of feet away. And it stinks really, really bad, okay? You cut it open, next picture here, you cut it open, it looks like brains, okay? And look at that texture there, okay? It feels like you're swallowing a mouthful of phlegm, and it doesn't taste much better either. I tried it while I was in the Philippines. Oh my goodness. But here's the thing, is there's something in durian that makes it addicting. And so my brother's addicted to it. The more he has, the more he wants, And I'm saying, dude, you're not feeding the right hunger, man, okay? But it's something, again, like I mentioned earlier, everyone has a God-shaped hole. We all do. The book of Ecclesiastes 3:11, it's not on the screen, but it says, he has also set eternity in the hearts of men. In other words, there's something that we know that's way beyond ourselves that creates a hunger in there, okay? But we need to feed that hunger and to feed it right. Everyone has a hunger for God, but if we don't feed that hunger, then we're not going to know it's there. And if we replace our hunger for God with hunger for the things of this world, we will hunger more for the things of this world than for God. A lot of times you'll find Jesus saying, whoever has an ear to hear, let him hear. Okay? In other words, what he says is, whoever has a heart to hunger for God's voice, go ahead and open it up and listen. Because a lot of times we hunger for things, that make us feel good. And we just, we'll flock to that. But Jesus says, hey, I'm going to say some hard things here. If you've got a hungry heart, you'll hear. So have a hungry heart. But God is calling us daily to be aware of our appetites. So let's look at hungering for God's voice real quick. God responds to the hungry. Okay? If there's anything true about God, it's that he will come to the aid of the hurting and meet those who are hungry and who choose to seek him. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they will be filled." They will be filled. And I believe the same is true for those who hunger for his voice. God will respond and share his voice and speak to those who hunger for him. And the opposite is true. If we don't hunger for his voice, God doesn't fill. God is drawn to the hungry. And God speaks to those who are hungry to hear. Next, pray and call out to God. Pray and call out to him. You know, I think most people, whether you're a Christ follower or not, would agree that we don't pray enough. Okay? Who would join me? I'm the first one to say, I don't pray enough. And I want to pray more. Okay? But something else sometimes. Because the Bible talks about prayer, but it also talks about calling out to God vocally. Where we vocalize what's in our heart, where we let our hunger for God out. It springs up from the depths of what's inside, and we let it out, and we say, God, I need you. And we start vocalizing, not just in our minds, but out loud. I'm not talking about you have to be at the mall and do that, okay? You can go and in your room, your car, wherever it is, by yourself, and you call out to God. Here's a couple of Bible passages with that. Psalm 17:6, I call on you, O God, for you will answer me. You will answer me. Next, Jeremiah, call to me, and I will answer you. This is God speaking to him. And tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. So I'll speak to you. I'll come meet you. You know, if we desire his voice, or have any sort of hunger for it, vocalize it to him. And last, express hunger through worship. And we're gonna close with singing a little bit today. Looking back at Psalm 63, David begins to vocalize his hunger and thirst for God through worship. We read that at the beginning of the talk. As we worship, we begin to hunger for God and his voice even more. Because when we truly worship, as David said, he said this, we will see you, God, in your sanctuary and behold your power and your glory. And we begin to see that his love is better than life. It's like, whoa, really? And it's only through a time of worship that we begin to realize that our hearts begin to connect with his. You know, and if you want to cultivate our hunger for God and hear his voice, we need to worship. We need to worship with all of our hearts. God designed us that way. That when we worship him, he reveals himself to us. And when we enter his presence through worship, he shows us more of who he is. And who he is very desirable. Very desirable. Something about worship that he not only begins to reveal himself, but he also begins to speak to us in one way or another, either directly to our heart by his Spirit, or through a message of prophecy like we talked about last week, or through the words in the song, where God's will is revealed and his heart is shown and poured into the lives of those who worship him. It was in a worship service in the book of Acts that Paul and Silas, that God's Spirit spoke and said, I want you to send these two out into the mission field. It was in a worship service that happened. It was in a worship service on a winter retreat where God clearly spoke to me and changed my life in the direction of where I was going. And when we worship, we place ourselves in a position to hear his voice. We enter into a position of being teachable and humble and hungry for him. And so if you want to hear God's voice, worship. If you want to hunger for more of God or more of his voice, worship. Pour out your heart to him. Cry out to him. Vocalize what's in here. And yeah, come on up. You know, and it's so much more than singing songs. It's entering into his presence to bless him, to seek him, to pour out the dryness of our soul so that he can send his river of, as